Hey, hey, hey. What an absolute mess. What an absolute mess. Now, for some reason, I'm not entirely sure why it's saying my stream. God, crying out loud. Oh, what's going on? Okay. Let's go back. Save that. No, that's not the thumbnail. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's change that. Thumbnail. Okay, that's better. Let's get the link to the stream. Put it live now. Okay, and get the title as well. Okay. Now, where were we? So, tonight's stream won't be very long, but we'll go through it as quickly as we can. 24,000 Afghans are offered asylum in the UK after data breach scandal or Just Starmer. No, that's just a little English joke there behind Just Starmer. So if you know what I'm talking about, probably not many laughs out there. Judging from the reaction, it's an inside joke. So not going to be many people laughing. So what happened? This all came out today, out of nowhere. Now, let's get some things out there first regarding the situation of whether or not this is a scandal or not, so we'll go through details. So, what was the controversy? Okay, so the UK government, back in 2022, so the Tory government would be in power at this point, Tory party in power, to prevent the disclosure of Afghan interpreters and other helpers' names, highlight the legal mechanisms available to protect sensitive information, particularly when national security and lives are at risk. So that's a reference to this data breach, where they think that it could have cost the government about £7 billion by resettling these refugees. Okay, so there are asylum seekers and refugees. I'm making this distinction deliberately because some people online, particularly those on Twitter, don't know the difference. And it doesn't matter in the like if you look at the bigger picture, but it's important to have the distinction because this is exactly what the Tories are going to fall on, or fall back on, I should say, to get themselves out of this. Okay? So, they went and got themselves a court injunction. The court injunction, sorry for the audio because there's actually a fan as well, so it might affect the audio a little bit. Now, I think Rachel Reeves was having a speech on Tuesday as well, according to the Telegraph. Today, of course. I don't know, I didn't actually hear it, or it just happened, because it was supposed to be quite late at night. Now, we don't know the exact cost. So, the breach occurred in February 2022, when the Royal Marine sent an email to a group of Afghans and accidentally included a spreadsheet containing the identities of 25,000 Afghans who are applying for asylum. soldiers who had worked with the British Army and their family members. Now, I'm not sure how many of those 25 Afghans were actually on the list that helped us out whilst the soldiers are in Afghanistan, but nevertheless, there's going to be quite a few in there, at least. So, it came to light a year later in 2023 when an anonymous Facebook user posted extracts of the data. The posts were deleted within 3 days after MOD officials contacted Meta, which is Facebook's owner, but the government had decided it had no choice but to offer asylum to Afghans affected because they're at risk of reprisal attacks from the Taliban. That's what they're saying. A number of former Afghan Special Forces personnel have been murdered by the Taliban since it regained power in Afghanistan in 2021. Some of those who are now come to Britain had asylum applications rejected previously, with officials forced into reversal. The number expected to be brought to Britain as a result of the breach was initially stated in court documents to be nearly 43,000 people. However, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, will tell Parliament on Tuesday, being today of course, that just 6,900 Afghans will be brought to Britain as a direct result of the breach, under a scheme set up specifically to deal with the fallout. According to the MOD, of these, 4,500 are already in the country or in transit, and 2,400 more are yet to travel. Officials said a further 17,000 Afghans deemed eligible to come to Britain under a separate relocation scheme were also found to be affected by the breach. Of these, 14,000 are already in the country or in transit, or 3,000 more yet to travel. In total, it is believed that between 80,000 and 100,000 people are affected by the data breach, the Court of Appeal has said. The government has fought a 2-year legal battle to keep the leak a secret, including securing a super injunction which has until now prevented the Telegraph and other media organisations from not only reporting the data breach, but also mentioning the very existence of the legal battle. The super injunction was lifted at midday today by the High Court. It is the most serious data breach in British history, dwarfing previous episodes such as the 2013 Snowden leaks detailing GCHQ's secret surveillance methods used against millions of internet users. The database also included details of British government officials, the Telegraph understands. Okay, so both the speakers of the House of Commons and the House of Lords are informed of the leak in September 2023, so they can make informed decisions as to how matters should be handled in Parliament. MPs have been unable to ask questions about the leak owing to the super injunction. Okay, so that was from 2023. We had the general election in 2024 in July. Okay, so Afghan soldiers were named in this leak. Right, that's the gist of the background of the report. So, before we get to what Ben the Wally Wallace said, or we're going to give Putin a bloody nose Wallace, and also what's also been said by the Telegraph regarding what Mr. Justice Chamberlain, who tried to overturn the super injunction. Okay, so what's been happening? So what's actually occurring here? Why are we actually? Why is it not deemed a scandal as such? Well, for obvious reasons, because the government are going to argue that, revealing the identities, as I mentioned, of the Afghans who assisted our British forces to put them at risk of retaliation. And of course, under UK law, injunctions, especially super injunctions or reporting restrictions, can be granted if disclosure would cause, quote, real and immediate risk to life, which is under Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is incorporated into UK law via the Human Rights Act 1998. You also look at the, you look at this other situation regarding national security justification, which is the government may have invoked Section 6 of the Justice and Security Act 2013, which allows closed material procedures, secret court hearings, where sensitive evidence is heard without public or private access. Public or press access, Should correct myself there. Press access. Okay. So, everything there, where has it gone here? Sorry, just skip ahead there a little bit. Alright. The judge would have been presented with a classified intelligence assessment showing the danger to Afghan allies if their identities were leaked. And of course, you look at individual safety versus public interest, of course, and then, of course, why the judge would have even ruled in the government's favour, of course. Right? So there's obviously evidence of a threat. That's what the judge looked at. A president. So UK courts have previously granted injunctions in cases involving national security, for example, preventing the naming of MI6 agents. And of course, there is also alternative measures. The government may have argued that redactions or anonymized disclosures were insufficient, given the Taliban's ability to cross-reference data. Well, I thought the Taliban would throw back to the 7th century, but never mind. So why has it caused so much controversy? Because they can always fall back on this whole idea about how it's about national security and protecting identities, which I can understand. And of course, the government would have gone based on the resettlement rather than the asylum side of things. So they're not asylum seekers, even though they've been offered asylum, we're just resettling them, or vice versa, right? So if you're actually given a resettlement or going for a resettlement scheme, you technically are no longer asylum. They're not classed as asylum seeker. You actually got like what one might say a pre-approved visa. So rather than going through the asylum process, you're effectively given indefinite leave to remain. And if you remember when we had this situation with the Syrian refugees, right? They don't necessarily count them in the ONS data. The ONS data. They don't count those into the figures. And the same applies to Ukraine refugees as well. Okay? So that all being said, I'm trying to work out why the stream is on YouTube, but it's not, even though it says here. Oh, never mind, let's just carry on. I don't know what the hell's going on, to be honest. It says I'm live, but I'm running the stream now, so I'm obviously doing something. Okay, let's carry on. So there is a lot of data which the ONS wouldn't have got, because if the ONS have to be accurate, they have to gain data such as the visa data, the passenger data from an IPS, for example. But evacuation flights are never, one might say, provided in relation to data. Okay, and of course, remember when these people have come across from the Russian illegals, of course, come across from France into the UK via boats. They're put into hotels and military bases. They're not necessarily counting the data as well. Think about that as well. They're not actually included in the data as well. Those guys who are coming over from France. So the ONS haven't done anything wrong. Let's just be clear on that. From what we know so far, the ONS have done nothing wrong. I think it's important to make that distinction. Now, there is also inconsistency, transparency issues, and the general debate we have in this country, which has been affected by this. And it's how conniving politicians are. How crooked, how corrupt they are. Because they can get away with it. There's no recourse on this, guys. I wish there was, but there isn't. Because the UK government hasn't broken any law. It's disgusting what they did. It's disgusting how it came to this, but they haven't done a lot wrong. And of course, Labour are not going to spend time thinking, let's go through all this. Because the Tories are already in the toilet in terms of favourables, let's put it that way. The toilet meaning they're in the sewer, right? But from Labour's point of view, now the question is, they also knew about it. They don't have to know about it, they're in opposition. Everyone in Parliament couldn't talk about it. MPs would have been briefed on this. But I think they can't understand why the government did what they did. They can't understand that. I can't understand why they've done it. If I was in their shoes, we would have probably done the same thing. You probably want to. But they did. We've probably done it as well. But this is what I'm getting this all out now because I want to go straight to the two articles that came out. So Ben Wallace just couldn't wait to run to the Telegraph. So calculated, idiot. If you think Afghanistan's bad when it comes to this stuff, just wait till we find out what happened with Ukraine. It's actually much worse than this. But we're not going to hear about Ukraine for God knows how many years, because obviously the war's still ongoing with Russia. With this obsession we've got to stop Putin, because Putin is hilarious, these guys about Putin. He's capable of getting to France anytime soon, but also mocked by the same people because he can't take Ukraine in 3 days. And laughing and mocking the Russians how bad they are. Well, which is it? Pick one. So, Ben Wallace says this. This is the actual article from the Telegraph. He posted today at around 8:20, I think it was, this evening. The first I knew that something was going drastically wrong in Afghanistan was in the press room at the Pentagon, standing alongside the then US Defense Secretary. A journalist asked my counterpart about the secret annex to the Trump peace deal. What secret annex, I thought? Our closest ally hadn't shared with us. When we finally saw the annex, I was horrified that it could have never been written more in the Taliban's favour if it tried. The annex forced the existing Afghan government to release more than 4,000 of the worst Taliban prisoners, while at the same time committing US air power special forces staying grounded or in the barracks. I said at the time it was a rotten deal that allowed the Taliban to storm Kabul without any compromise. Donald Trump now tries to blame Joe Biden, but it was his conditions that allowed such a victory for the group that killed so many allies and local opposition. Priti Patel at the Home Secretary and I had agreed to accelerate relocation to the UK. Okay, so he's also put Priti Patel's name in that too, which is fine. I dispatched General Jenkins for 2 weeks to spend time in the country with the Afghan militaries and president. Jenkins was an Afghan veteran and knew many in the military leadership. What he reported back was not good reading and went against the Foreign Office and other advice I was getting in the department. This thing was heading for a collapse. I think we can all agree with that. What those who criticise our actions forget that this was an evacuation of forces and allies who had been based in Afghanistan for 20 years. We need to act rapidly. Our own veterans felt a bond of honour to those who helped them. Many Afghans were afraid. We can understand too. They say that to lead is to choose. As a government, we had to make a choice about who was entitled to come. We do not want members of the Afghan armies just cut and run. The Allies had invested billions in training them, like you're doing in Ukraine right now. Look at the results on the ground. Being in the Afghan army will not on its own offer you a route out to a new life. The only forces that had directly worked with us and within recent years were eligible for resettlement. Many in the country were scared. Overwhelming number of Afghans applied for every route that they could get out. This completely blocked the system as duplicate applications built up. The weight of applications threatened to thwart the legitimate claimants. Many were not eligible anyway at all. All of us tried every way we could clear the list of applicants. I personally signed off hundreds. UK personnel had to work from sketchy and historical records from former comrades. We found applications from known Islamic State and Al-Qaeda sympathizers and from people who had been dismissed for collaboration with the Taliban. The successful applicants had to be processed and flown out, some even smuggled out. That's his own word. This is Ben Wallace's own words. Some even smuggled out. Which is why you're now seeing references on Twitter with people saying this is now Tory smuggling operation. Okay. And he goes on. My officials and military personnel could not rely on old records, so we had to keep up a constant dialogue with those in the country. One such member, amongst all the chaos in trying to do the right thing, accidentally sent more data than they should to some in Afghanistan. It was a mistake, it wasn't a conspiracy, and it wasn't a reckless betrayal. I wouldn't call it betrayal, I'll call it incompetence, like I've always said. No one knew of this error until a year later when a disgruntled Afghan tried to blackmail us. Now, Afghans blackmailing the UK government. How about that? And no one knew of this error until a year later? How incompetent were you guys? On being informed, I was determined that the first priority was to protect all those that might be at risk. My primary concern was their welfare. My priority was not the UK government nor politics, it was the veterans and those who needed to get out. We did all we could to continue to evacuate even more people who are now at risk and do so even for even more routes, air or land. You've got to wonder what's been going on with those Ukraine refugees, particularly women in this country and across Europe. Don't be surprised as any reports come out about the trafficking of Ukraine women across the entire continent, particularly here in the UK, doing God knows what. You will see. I make no apology for applying to the court for an injunction at the time. Okay, this is him saying that. It was not at some archaically trying to claim a cover-up. I took the view that if this leak was reported at the time, the existence of the list would put in peril those we needed to help out. Some may disagree, but I imagine if the Taliban had been alerted to the existence of this list, I would dread to think what had happened. I shall leave it to you to decide what you would have done. But in the end, we got more than 18,000 people out. With the help of brave souls and allies, we took more than most. Okay, which shows that we were too generous. At the time, we informed the opposition, now the government and the Speaker of the House. We always knew there would be a time for this to become public. 3 years since the leak has now become so. The judge has done the right thing throughout, but let's not forget the environment at the time. Okay, now, I grant the point. What you would have done in my shoes. Okay, let's just grant that for argument's sake. This is not me condoning or backing what he's done. I'm not a fan of the guy at all. But for argument's sake, let's just go over it, yeah? Right. Another article in the Telegraph, which I came across, was actually a little bit before I think Ben Wallace published his one. Gordon Rayner, associate editor. Quote, "Am I going bonkers? The judge who tried to stop the Afghan cover-up. Mr. Justice Chamberlain tried to overturn the super injunction hiding $7 billion scheme before last year's election." Am I going bonkers? Those were the words of a High Court judge as he discovered the full extent of the government cover-up of a secret immigration scheme. Mr. Justice Chamberlain had just been told that $6 billion of public spending, now $7 billion, was being hidden with the use of an unprecedented super injunction. While the cover-up was ostensibly to protect thousands of Afghans who helped the British government, as well as their families, ministers also appeared to be trying to protect themselves. The super injunction was lifted by Mr. Justice Chamberlain in May last year, but the media was still gagged pending an appeal launched by Ministry of Defence. In June last year, the Court of Appeal upheld the MOD's appeal, meaning the super injunction remained in place. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, said in one memo seen by the court that, quote, "political and reputational considerations had been a key factor in forming the government's response. For the first time in British history, a government had used the court to prevent anyone, in particular media MPs, from revealing not only what they've been up to, but also the very existence of the court proceedings." This is an exchange in November 11th, 2024. This is just part of the exchange. Mr. Justice Chamberlain said, "When you are dealing with a public expenditure of that magnitude, it's not possible to lose that amount of money back down the back of the sofa. It's not secret intelligence programs. It's putting real people up in real accommodation in the UK without revealing it's happening." So this is the part which is what was deemed as a scandal or an injustice or as something which is really angering people. This part. There was going to be an announcement made to Parliament but which the word cover is used. The basis of the expenditure of all this money isn't going to be revealed. Jude Bunting KC. One of the key issues in the political debate right now is who is telling the truth about the public deficit. This is directly relevant to that debate. Another key is immigration. The injunction is stopping an informed debate about how to house people coming to this country. that agreed narrative is misleading the public by omission. I repeat, the injunction is stopping informed debate about how to house people coming to this country. That, quote, agreed narrative is misleading the public by omission. Mrs. Justice Chamberlain said, the statement to Parliament will provide cover. It is a complete unprecedented situation, but we are seeing a witness statement indicating a statement to Parliament to provide cover. It is a very, very striking thing. This is what's angered people. This bit about covering up. What happened? The injunction itself is not what people are getting angry too much. But people are upset about it, but not saying that's the quote-unquote scandal. Is he trying to cover this up? What you were doing? Phone go off for some reason. That's the message here. I'll cover it later. I'll get to it later. Okay, right. Mr. Justice Chamberlain recognised for what it was, an unparalleled assault on free speech, and, as one barrister put it, a way for ministers to, quote, deliberately mislead the public. Super injunctions more commonly obtained by footballers to shut down reporting of extramarital affairs were, quote, interferences with freedom of expression which take place under the radar, the judge said. And when the government obtained one, it was, quote, likely to give rise to understandable suspicion that the court's processes are being used for the purposes of censorship. I repeat that again to you. Repeat that again. This is very important. The judge said, but when the government obtained one, it was likely to give rise to understandable suspicion that the court's processes are being used for the purpose of censorship. Okay? He's not making a quote-unquote, one might say, a judgment call on this. He's describing to you this is what their mindset was at the time. Mr. Justice Chamberlain observed that the injunction granted by another judge in September 2023 was, quote, completely shutting down democratic accountability and decided to lift it only for the Court of Appeal to overrule it. He said it was, quote, the first contra mundum super injunction ever granted, end quote. The Latin phrase there, contra mundum, is for against the whole world, explains what the court order meant. Instead of being granted against a named individual or news organisation, anyone at all who learnt of the leak was banned from talking about it under threat of imprisonment. Repeat that again to you. Instead of being granted against a named individual or news organisation, anyone at all who learnt of the leak was banned from talking about it under the threat of imprisonment. Grant Shapps had been granted the injunction on his second day as Defence Secretary after journalists approached the Ministry of Defence for comment on the story about the vast data breach that exposed the identities and addresses of Afghan soldiers seeking asylum in the UK. Rishi Sunak's government decided the public must not find out about a secret plan to offer 24,000 Afghans asylum. So the decision was made that this leak happened, we've got to give these guys asylum, and then Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. At the time they felt, look, we cannot make this secret plan of ours public. We can't. Which led up to the election, of course, in 2020. Was it July 2024. It argued that lives would be at risk if the media or Parliament revealed the existence of the leak or the asylum scheme that followed, because the Taliban would be alerted to the existence of the list and would target those who helped the US-led coalition before its withdrawal in 2021. Okay, here's the problem with that. You kept secret also the number of people coming in. You weren't talking about some list that might be leaked out. You were also trying to cover up and not, in other words, cover, or give yourself some cover, I should say, using that excuse not to reveal to the public that you've got over 20,000 people coming in. Because the ONS numbers probably won't show this, and there's nothing wrong with what the ONS did there, because you put yourselves in a position where you do not have to you're not legally required to reveal those numbers publicly. Then it says, instead of being in place for 4 months, as originally requested while the MOD organised an airlift of those affected, The Sunak government and then the Labour government that replaced it last year kept the injunction in place for nearly 2 years. It originally placed for 4 months, they then decided to keep it on for 2 years. The Sunak government, then the Labour government that replaced it last year, kept the injunction in place for nearly 2 years. During that time, there was a sinister shift in ministers' reasoning for keeping the public in the dark. Okay. The government's lawyers told Mr. Justice Chamberlain that it wants to put, quote, agreed narrative in place to explain away the arrivals of large numbers of Afghans. In other words, lied to the public. The judge warned, quote, open justice is a cardinal constitutional principle from which deliberations can be justified only in exceptional circumstances. End quote. And as the case wore on over the course of dozens of hearings, it became clear he felt the definition was not being met. Tom Forster, KC, who was appointed by the judge as a special advocate to challenge the government in court, told him the lack of scrutiny had put, quote, the democratic process in the deep freeze. In February last year, he invited journalists from media organisations that knew about the leak and who had been threatened with jail if they reported it, to question Natalie Moore, a senior MOD official, at a hearing held behind closed doors. The journalist pointed out that the issue could affect the forthcoming general election and made a case anew for the public to be told the truth. By May last year, before the election, the judge's patience had run out. He ruled that the continued stifling of public debate could no longer be justified and said the injunction was closing off public debate on an issue of profound moral and economic significance. The MOD immediately appealed, hiring one of the country's most eminent barristers, Sir James Eadie KC, at the taxpayer's expense. He persuaded the Court of Appeal to overrule Mr. Justice Chamberlain and keep the injunction in place. In October, a cabinet subcommittee chaired by Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and attended by Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, Mr. Healy, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and Shabana Mahmood, the Lord Chancellor, decided provisionally to expand the asylum scheme. By then, the projected cost had increased to $6 billion. And another hearing last November, this is in 2024 of course, when Mr. Justice Chamberlain was told how much public spending was being concealed, he spluttered, quote, I'm starting to doubt myself. Am I going bonkers, as I originally said from the first quote at the start of the article? Because is it really $6 billion? When you're dealing with public expenditure of that magnitude, it is not possible to lose the amount of money down the back of the sofa. It is not secret intelligence programs, it's putting real people up in real accommodation in the UK without revealing it's happening. The basis of the expenditure of all this money isn't going to be revealed. Goes on. Miss Moore told the court a statement, and when I say Miss Moore, just to remind people I mentioned Miss Moore, is Natalie Moore, who's a senior MOD official, so that's the Miss Moore I'm talking about now, told the court that a statement would be made to Parliament to provide cover for why so many Afghans arrive in Britain. A government briefing paper shown to the court said that ministers wanted to control narrative and use a robust public comm strategy to set out, quote, the scale but not the cause of the Afghans arriving. The judge said, quote, how feasible is it to spend that amount of money without the facts coming to light? But we're now seeing how it was feasible, making a statement that provides cover and agree a narrative, which is not true narrative, end quote, he added, is a very, very striking thing. Mr. Healy made a statement to Parliament in December in which mention was made of the resettlement scheme, followed by another statement earlier this month saying the scheme had ended. Last week, the government decided the threat to Afghan lives was, quote, less than previously thought, and that the super injunction might actually have been made the situation worse. Let me read that to you again. Last week, the government decided the threat of Afghan lives was, quote, less than previously thought, end quote, and that the super injunction might actually have made the situation worse. It paved the way for the injunction to be lifted and for the media to finally tell the truth to the public after being gagged for 683 days. This is Justice Chamberlain was one of the few people who came out and said this was not acceptable. This was not on. And this is one case whereby, probably the first example we've had that's now public, where a government, previous and the next one in line, two different parties, collaborated in some way by trying to use justification as to the reason why they did it, as in other words, to cover up the mess that was made in the first place, what they decided to do at the time, how they went about it, and that they stopped people from reporting this because there might be an election coming up, it makes us look bad, the cost of this is quite large. The judge is thinking, wait a minute, you can't really stop this because the public have a right to know. And that's what happened. That's insane. That's crazy. the reason I gave you the Ben Wallace article as well, because I want people to understand why he made a decision first, and he's given these reasonings for it. Then you go on to hear of what Gordon Rayner said in the Telegraph, what Mr. Justice Daniel Chamberlain revealed. Because what happened is actually a full transcript which I can't get to for some reason. It's out there, but I can't get to it. And now you see another article came out today from the Telegraph as well, saying that there are fears over riots after the secret asylum scheme made public. Ministers fear riots will break out in Britain after the news that a secret resettlement scheme for Afghans was kept hidden from the public. I'm not seeing any talk of a riot or anything like that at all. The same article mentions the Afghans have been settled in military accommodation and hotels across Britain at a cost of £400 million, with a total of £7 billion earmarked for the plans. Isn't that credible? The way they're going about this now? I want you to think about this. What do you think about this? They screw up, they cover up their mess. Okay, they give their reasons. Okay, we understand. We understand you were trying to do something quickly and drastic, but there was no scrutiny over this. The public were hidden about a few certain important things, such as how much it cost, who's coming to the country, right? Very important things. And now, you can use this as an excuse to crack down on people who might protest and be very unhappy about it. So guys, you're on Twitter, I'm telling you now, you better be careful what you tweet. I'm not saying you should be careful, but I'm saying you should be careful at the same time, because they'll come after you. How dare you be critical of us and instigate terror on the streets because you're unhappy with the way we covered us up. That's what might happen next. It might happen. I sincerely hope it doesn't, but it might happen. So, I decided to give all that. Okay. And the reason I did that was because I think it's best to give people a quick rundown. What happened, what's the story, what the Tories have said, what Ben Wallace came out with, and what's really going on. You guys can make your own mind up on that. It's too late. And what people don't seem to understand is, not us of course, it's one of the people who are in power. You've gone so far. People are so angry, so upset what's been happening, and it just goes on and on. The reason why people get more upset about it is because, well, quite frankly speaking, of everything you told us, everything you keep telling us about what you're planning to reduce the people coming over across the border, how people can settle here, it's reaching breaking point. People can forgive a few times when you lie and you don't tell the truth, and you want more time to resolve this. People get that. But it's gone for too long. Far too long. I mean, Tim Stanley, not exactly a radical guy, wrote in the actual Telegraph, it says, this is Watergate level stuff, but Westminster won't call us so. That's his own words. This guy's not radical. The last two or three paragraphs of his of his article, and he says, how did we ever lose that war? It seems half the local population was on our side, working as translators with British soldiers who got sick of pointing and repeating in a louder voice. Afghanistan, far from being a fundamentalist backwater, must have the best education system in the world, given how many citizens are fluent in English. This scandal, argued Edward Ley, is part of the original sin of us intervening in the Mediterranean and then scuttling out. And many voters will agree there should never have been a country in the first place. Anyone who knew about the history of Russia and Afghanistan knew that it was unconquerable. Anyone who'd seen living daylights could tell you that it was a dump. Well, bearing in mind that, of course, we held the Mujahideen with the, not us personally, with the Americans, with the Stingers. So Edward hoped that Britain had got over the liberal imperial itch and would be meddling in any ungovernable countries again. He didn't say that this includes meddling in Britain. That was a good way of ending that, actually. So I'll leave it there, guys. There's more discussion about this coming. There's going to be more about this going forward. More about this coming going forward. I suspect we're probably going to hear more about this in the coming days and weeks. So I'll leave it there in the stream, because I really want to go back to covering Ukraine, Russia, and believe me, the stuff about Ukraine, Jesus Christ, this will be nothing compared to what we'll reveal about Ukraine. But we're not to learn about this stuff until some years later, and most of these politicians will be dead probably, as in old age, gone. Right, have a good night. Until next time, I'll probably do a stream probably Friday or Saturday. I'm going to try another one covering this and see what the fallout is. We're going to see what goes on the poll numbers as well, but I don't suppose anything's going to change a lot, because it depends how people are saying this. But I'll give credit to the Telegraph. You know, I've been very critical of them. I'm not a fan of theirs, but the Telegraph paper came out all out and said this is not acceptable, and revealed a lot of details about this. People who are the quote-unquote new media are jumping on this now, making as if they knew about it, or they're sick and tired of it and they're angry about it. Well, you guys are asleep on this too. And the media, I suspect, were following the rules, said that enough. They got people out there to talk about it. So Justice Chamberlain is one of the people we should be thankful for, because he's one of the people who pushed back on the government at the time and felt it was unacceptable the way they did it, how they approached it, how they went about their business, and the fact that it's actually very important for a country like us to know what the hell was going on with our money, who's come into the country. And this guy's in the justice system, yet the government found a way around it. There we are.